In the spring of 1220, on the far edges of the ancient land of Khorasan, a mother stood frozen in place as Mongol soldiers pulled her 14-year-old daughter away from her grasp. The girl did not scream, she did not fight. Her eyes stayed locked on the dirt beneath her feet as she walked. She understood something instinctively, that resistance would only sharpen the cruelty. Her name was Zarya, a name her mother once whispered into the dark during lullabies, now reduced to a line in Mongol military records. Age, height, hair color, body type, fertility potential, every detail recorded with cold precision. In that moment, Zarya Music stopped being a daughter. She stopped being a child. She became data. What happened to Zarya was not an isolated crime. It was part of something far larger, a system, an imperial mechanism that weaponized the female body as effectively as arrows or cavalry. Mongol conquest was never only about land or gold. It was about controlling populations at their most fundamental level. Maternity itself, music, became a political resource, tracked not in victory songs, but buried deep in the genetic memory of future generations. This was not simple expansion. It was biological integration. Centuries later, genetic studies would reveal traces of Mongol blood scattered across Eurasia, music embedded in millions of living people. The true power of Genghis Khan was not only in how far his armies marched, but in the human legacy he engineered with ruthless calculation. This is the story of how one man turned reproduction into an instrument of empire and why its consequences still echo today. To understand how such a system came into existence, we must return to Mongolia in 1162, when a boy named Temujin was born into a world ruled by scarcity and violence. His tribe was weak, impoverished, and constantly preyed upon by stronger clans. Survival meant taking before you were taken from. When Temujin was only 9 years old, his father Music was poisoned by tribal enemies. Overnight, his family lost protection, status, and allies. His mother Helen was abandoned with her children and left to fend for herself. They survived on whatever the land would give them. Roots, music pulled from frozen soil, raw fish dragged from rivers, scraps scavenged from abandoned camps. Hunger was constant, danger was constant. For young Temujin, the world began to divide itself into two kinds of people: those who held power and those who music suffered beneath it. At 16, Temujin experienced a loss that would reshape his understanding of power forever. His promised bride, Berta, was abducted by a rival tribe. For months he searched for her, tormented by rumors of what might be happening to her: rape, enslavement, death. Each possibility carved music deeper into him. When he finally found Berta, she was alive, but she was pregnant. The child's father could never be known. Temujin accepted her without hesitation. But something hardened inside him that night. He began to see women differently, not as possessions, not merely as companions, but as the carriers of the future itself. Whoever controlled reproduction, he realized, controlled what came next. Control the womb, and you control generations. As Temujin began gathering followers and building power, his thinking went far beyond battlefield tactics. He observed what others overlooked. After raids, defeated tribes often collapsed. Men killed themselves rather than submit. Entire lineages vanished in days, but women endured. They adapted. They gave birth, and their children grew up knowing music, who had conquered their mothers. To Temujin, this was not a threat. It was an opportunity. If he could control reproduction systematically, conquest would not need constant enforcement. He wouldn't need endless garrisons. Over time, conquered people would become Mongol from the inside out. Identity would be rewritten through blood. By 1206, when the tribes of the steppe proclaimed him Great Khan, Genghis Khan, this vision was already in motion. What later administrators would call the system of permanent seating was not philosophy. It was protocol, and it had already been tested. The first larger-scale implementation came in 129 during the campaign against the Tangut kingdom. The Mongols did not attack like disorganized raiders. They advanced with planning and structure. Alongside warriors, traveled scribes, administrators and physicians, trained in female anatomy. Weeks before the siege, spies infiltrated Tangut cities, conducting secret censuses. How many women lived there? What were their ages, their family histories, their physical conditions? Scroll after scroll filled with information that would later guide policy. When the cities fell, the men were executed or enslaved. The women were not treated as a single group. They were divided with chilling precision. Primary reproducers, ages 14 to 30, healthy, no visible defects. Secondary reproducers, ages 31 to 40, preferably women who had already given birth. The rest, children, the elderly, the sick, were discarded. Music, those selected, were marked with ink on their wrists and sent into caravans built to trail the army. The others disappeared. These caravans were unlike anything the world had seen. They were not chaotic chains of prisoners, but rolling systems of human processing. Wagons separated newly captured women from those already pregnant. Some held women who had recently given birth. Others confined those deemed unproductive, awaiting slow elimination. Mongol physicians experimented relentlessly. Herbs to speed ovulation, diets to increase fertility, even crude surgeries meant to correct reproductive defects. Women were no longer seen as people, they were breeding stock. Every assault was documented, every pregnancy recorded, every birth evaluated. Infants were judged by physical traits. Those deemed promising were taken and raised as Mongols. The rest were quietly destroyed. Women lost their names the moment they were processed. From then on, they existed only as numbers, tattooed identifiers tracking origin, fertility history, and value. Some women whispered their real names into their children's ears, hoping sound might outlive them. Others cut marks into their own skin, desperate to remember who they had once been. But individuality was crushed with terrifying efficiency. Within a single generation, identity itself had become a liability. By 1211, when Genghis Khan turned his attention to the Jin Empire of northern China, the machinery was complete. The Mongols were no longer just conquering land. They were conquering wombs. In the capture of Chengdu alone, more than 40,000 women of reproductive age were seized. By 1213, records describe caravans containing over 100,000 women, stretching for miles behind the army. The process had become music industrial. Capture, classify, condition, violate, impregnate, birth, reassign. Children born into the system faced sorting of their own. Those with sufficiently Mongol features were taken from their mothers and placed into Mongol households. The rest did not survive infancy. Resistance was anticipated and punished with protocol.